question I must ask myself, do I usually focus on others and their interest or on my own? Many years ago, a person that I've had the privilege of mentoring, Dan Ryland, and I were having a discussion. And he said to me, he said, John, you have charisma. And I said, well, people tell me that. But I said, I think that's just kind of a gift that some people have, some people don't. And he stopped. He said, no, you're wrong. I said, what do you mean I'm wrong? He said, charisma is not a gift. It's not a talent at all. It's a mindset. I said, what do you mean? And that day, he taught me a very valuable lesson about charisma. In your notes, people with charisma focus on others. That's what makes people like them. And people without charisma focus on themselves. It's a mindset. If you are focusing on others, I promise you, you'll develop a charismatic personality. If you focus on yourselves, hello. This is classic. This is Dale Carnegie, 6 Ways to Make People Like You. Carnegie's teachings in the class and in How to Win Friends and Influence People made a profound impression on me as a teenager. By the time I graduated, I had, with my father, taken 2 Dale Carnegie courses. In fact, they had such an impact that I've worked to pattern my people skills on much of what he taught. And here are 6 things Carnegie suggests, along with my explanation. Number 1, become genuinely interested in other people. People do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. Number 2, smile. You say, John, there's got to be more to it than that. No, really there isn't. Just smile. People all the time will come to me and say, you know what, John, you just have this natural smile. No, I don't. No, I don't have a natural smile. You don't have a natural smile. Nobody has a natural smile. We had to work our way out into this world. Think about it. And as soon as we got out, the doctor looked at us and smacked us. No wonder we are negative the rest of our life. Now we go to the 3rd level of relationships, which is the trust level. Can we build mutual trust? At this level, there are 5 people principles. Number 12, the bedrock principle. The bedrock principle basically says trust is the foundation of any relationship. George MacDonald said it right when he said, it is a greater compliment to be trusted than to be loved. And the question is, that I must ask myself, am I a trustworthy person? Warren Bennis says integrity is the basis of trust, which is not so much an ingredient of leadership as it is a product. It is the one quality that cannot be acquired but must be earned. It is given by co-workers and followers, and without it the leader cannot function. So 3 truths about trust. Number 1, trust begins with yourself. That's why Shakespeare wrote, this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. If you're not honest with yourself, you will not be capable of honesty with others. Self-deception is the enemy of relationships. It also undermines personal growth. If a person does not admit his shortcomings, he cannot improve them. It goes back to a principle we've already learned, the mirror principle. The first person we must examine is ourselves. Trust begins with yourself. Number 2, trust cannot be compartmentalized. Cheryl Beale, the wife and friend of a friend and author Bob Beale, says, one of the realities of life is that if you can't trust a person at all points, you can't trust him or her at any point. Goes back to a book I wrote, There's No Such Thing as Business Ethics. Why? Because there's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics. You can't compartmentalize ethics. You can't compartmentalize trust. You can't look at your people and that work with you and say, you can trust me, and go home with your family and say, you can't trust me. It's got to be trust in all areas. Thirdly, trust works like a bank account. Mike Abrashoff, author of It's Your Ship, states, trust is like a bank account. You have got to keep making deposits if you want it to grow. On occasions, things will go wrong and you have to make a withdrawal. Meanwhile, it is sitting in the bank earning interest. It's a great comparison. You've got trust is like a bank account. You've got to be putting something in. And if you and I use the phrase, it's like coins in my pocket. It's like change in my pocket. And I'm either gathering change and having more, or else I'm losing change. And here's what I want you to understand in this area of trust. When you and I fail, if we have been trustworthy and we have made a lot of deposits, we have something we can lean on that will get us through it. But if we're low on our trust change and we do something wrong, we're bankrupt. So questions to ask yourself. Questions such as, am I making deposits? Think about your most important relationships. Are you exhibiting trustworthy behavior that's putting relational money in the bank? Am I making withdrawals? Have you undermined trust in any of these important relationships? If so, you need to try to make things right. Don't wait another minute to take the appropriate action by doing the following. In other words, if you are withdrawing and you're losing trust, number one, apologize. Number two, ask yourself why you broke trust. Spend some time with yourself. And I would also say, if you can't figure that out, go to someone who cares much for you and ask them, why have I broken this trust? Number three, correct the trust issue in your life. Once you have discovered why you have broken a trust, now let's make some real effort to correct this issue in your life. Number four, boy, this one is so true. Recognize that it takes longer to restore trust than to lose it. You lose trust, I lose trust quickly. And when I do lose trust, it takes a long time to restore. Again, in my counseling with people in the area of relationships, that's one of the reasons I've always said, have relationships that are always trustworthy, because if you break that trust in a relationship, you can break that trust very quickly, but it takes a long time to rebuild it. Number five, remember, trust is restored by deeds, not just words. In other words, doing these things won't earn you new change, but it may stop you from losing more. And you just might save a relationship. A great question to ask is this one. Am I compounding my trust? Mike Krzyzewski, the head coach in basketball at Duke University, offers this advice. If you set up an atmosphere of communication and trust, it becomes a tradition. Older team members will establish your credibility with newer ones. And even if they don't like everything about you, they still say he's trustworthy, he's committed to us in a team. Back in 1978, I had a friend that has been one of my mentors throughout life. His name is Tom Philippi. And I was very, very young and starting to get a little bit of success. And Tom sat down with me one day, I'll never forget, over dinner, and he said, John, he said, you're doing good. And he said, you're going to do very well. And he said, one of the issues that you're going to have that will be the most difficult as you get successful is you're going to always be asking yourself, who can I trust? Why are they around me? What do they want? What's in it for them? And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, I just want you to know that as you journey in your life, I will always be a trustworthy person for you. You will always be able to trust me. And now that was said to me, oh my goodness, that was said to me in the 70s. That was said to me 30 years ago. And I have found that Tom to be exactly that kind of a friend. It's been tested. His trust has been tested dozens of times. And he's never violated it. And it's been a great encouragement to me to be also that kind of a trustworthy friend to someone else. Somebody that they can just trust. In closing on this people principle, writer and chaplain to Queen Victoria, Charles Kingsley, said, "A blessed thing it is for any man or woman to have a friend, one human soul, whom we can trust utterly." I love this phrase right here. "Who knows the best and the worst of us, and who loves us in spite of all of our faults." Whew. That's a major statement. People principle number 13. The situation principle. Never let the situation mean more than the relationship. The question I must ask myself is, do I sometimes put the situation ahead of my relationship? I one time had a friend of mine tell me it's more rewarding to resolve a situation than it is to dissolve a relationship, and that is so very, very true. You know, when you and I take our marriage vows and we get married, of course, again, you can talk no sense into them. So they're just holding hands and thinking about the wedding cake, and it's hello. But there's a reason in those vows that we talk about for better or worse, for richer, for poor. Now you see, again, I don't think they do any good because we're all thinking for better, for richer. I mean, it's just kind of worthless. But you're trying to help them understand there is a downside in making commitments. Now, the good news is, although you can't do much about it that day, they will very quickly find the other side. They'll very quickly realize that there's as much worse sometimes as there is better, and that life is difficult. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Situations that occur, it's those situations and how we handle those situations that will either draw us closer in our relationship or it will begin to separate us in that relationship. So in your notes, take a moment to think about your relationships, and now look at the following list and determine which words best describe them. And you can see the bad ones are on the left and the good ones are on the right. Volatile or steady, deceitful or open, selfish or mature, draining or refreshing, insecure or secure, manipulating or accepting, conditional or unconditional, breaking or bonding. The column on the left describes interaction where the relationship fluctuates with the situation. Boy, that's so true. The column on the right describes interaction where the relationship is rock solid regardless of the situation. In my book, Today Matters, I write, successful people make right decisions early, and then they manage those decisions daily. And to keep your perspective and prevent you from allowing the situation to become more important than the relationship, you can ask yourself several questions. I suggest you start with these 4. Do I see the big picture or just the bad picture? And number 2, do I communicate the big picture along with the bad one? I'll stop here just for a moment to say, I grew up in a wonderful home. I had tremendous parents. In fact, they're still alive. And I was an ornery kid. You find that would be very difficult for you to imagine that, but I was an ornery kid. I just, not like a bad kid. If you're high energy and you're creative, you just get in trouble. And I did. And my parents, before they would discipline me, I can still remember it so well. They, because here it comes. I'm going to get disciplined again. In fact, there are many times when I would be doing something saying, this will cost me. This will cost me. But it is so much fun, I'll pay the price. And before disciplining me, never, ever was I disciplined without them first talking about how unconditionally they loved me. Now, as a kid, my thing back to them was, if you love me, you won't discipline. You know, I think maybe there's a softness or an opening for debate here or negotiation, and I never won that one. 30 minutes after the discipline, without fail, hundreds of times this has happened, Mom or Dad would come around, hold me, love on me, and tell me how valuable I was and how important I was and how unconditionally they loved me. They sandwiched it. And I'm going to tell you something. My self-image and who I am and what I think about myself is wrapped up in that ability to see the big picture, to have a total perspective, to never allow the situation to become more important than the relationship. Question number 3. Do I make, oh my, I see this happen so much. Do I make too many situations a life or death issue? Some families, some people at the workplace, just everything is life or death. And Dean Smith was so right. Used to be the coach at North Carolina, basketball coach. He said, if you make every game a life and death proposition, you'll be dead a lot. In other words, we need to pick our battles. I just see some people, they just get upset over the smallest of things. And what I've discovered about them is that almost always when people get upset over all the little things and make big things out of the little things, it's not the little things that's the problem. It's issues in their own heart that they've never resolved. Number 4, is this a one-time situation or an oft-repeated one? There's a big difference between a situation that occurs once and one that occurs again and again. Both affect the relationship and both require commitment. However, a recurring issue will need the commitment from all parties involved to sustain the relationship and ultimately change the situation. But if it's a one-time deal, be careful. Don't, again, let the situation mean more than the relationship. People principle number 14. The Bob principle. When Bob has a problem with everyone, Bob is usually the problem. Boy, that's the truth. Alexander Pope says, all seems infected, that the infected spy, as all looks yellow to the jaundiced eye. The question I must ask myself, am I Bob? Because it's so true. If Bob has a problem with everyone, usually Bob's the problem. And all of us, as we're taking these notes and listening to this relationship teaching, every one of us know Bob, don't we? Huh? I mean, just, no matter where he is, there are problems. Or, not always Bob, it can be Bobetta. So how do you know Bob when you see him? Number 1, Bob is a problem carrier. He just is. He carries problems with him. You have mail carriers, you understand? And every day they go and deliver the mail. We've got problem carriers. Every day they walk around delivering problems to people. As a young leader, again, having board meetings in the congregation that I was leading, it was just amazing. Every board meeting, there would be 3 or 4 of the board members that would say, well, we're having a problem here, we're having a problem there. And I'll never forget, after doing this for about 5 or 6 months, I said, you know what, let's do, if we're going to represent somebody that says there's a problem, I said, we have to say who it was. We just have to put a name with that problem. I'll never forget the next meeting when somebody said, well, there's a problem here. I'd say, who told you that? And they gave me a name. And I'll never forget, on the other side, a guy said, well, they told me that too. We discovered in a congregation of about 800, there were 11 people that were problem carriers. Every day they got up and delivered problems to certain people. And once we identified them and realized we were all carrying the problem mail for the problem carriers, we decided we weren't going to put it in our sack anymore. You understand? See, some people can find a solution in every problem, and there are a lot of people who can find a problem in every solution. They're problem carriers. Then Bob's not only a problem carrier, he's a problem finder. Oh, yes. Bob also likes to find problems and expose them to others. He subscribes to Chisholm's second law, which says, anytime things appear to be going better, you have overlooked something. Thirdly, Bob is a problem creator. Now we're going to the investment level of relationships. Are we willing to invest in others? And there are 5 people principles in the investment stage. Number 17, the gardening principle. The gardening principle says all relationships need cultivation. Samuel Butler said, friendship is like money, easier made than kept. And the question I must ask myself, do I occasionally or continually cultivate my relationships? Let's look at some ways to keep cultivating important relationships. What does it mean to cultivate a relationship? Whether it's as a spouse, parent, or a friend, you can start to cultivate a healthy, growing relationship by focusing on the following 6 things. Number 1, commitment. Researcher Dr. Kinsey observed, there may be nothing more important in a marriage than a determination that it shall persist. With such determination, individuals force themselves to adjust and to accept situations which would otherwise seem sufficient grounds for breakup. Scott Peck wrote a classic work on human psychology in the late 1970s called The Road Less Traveled. This book really marked my life. Since that time, he has offered ever-increasing insights from his lengthy practice as a psychiatrist, and one of his points involves laziness. Dr. Peck says, laziness is a contributing cause of evil, a primary cause of psychological illness, and the main reason that Americans are increasingly failing at human relationships. He notes that meaningful relationships require commitment and work. Those who are lazy are seldom willing to expend that kind of energy. Many marriage counselors would concur that laziness is the major cause for failure of marriages. Too often people know what needs to be done to restore a relationship but won't put forth the effort. Relational sloth has become an epidemic that we must honestly address. Number 2, to cultivate a relationship, communication. Number 2 is communication. Just the ability to have a system to communicate. One of the things that helped me and my wife, Margaret, is early in my marriage, what I would catch myself doing is I'd catch myself working all day, and when I come home, she'd say, well, what happened? And I said, well, nothing. What do you mean, nothing? Well, all right, well, something happened, but nothing important happened. Well, you can tell this is not a good thing. So many, many years ago, I'm talking about, we've been doing this for, 25 years at least, is that during our day, if something happens that we just learn about, or something fun happens, or something funny happens, or something that wasn't good happens, but anything that happens that is kind of noteworthy, we take a card out and we write what it is. We just make a little note to ourselves. Now this is huge. 25 years ago, I made a commitment that if something happened that was noteworthy, I would not tell anybody about it until I told Margaret first. Because what happens is if you tell a dozen people what happened during the day or something, by the time you get home, it's old hat. The first time you've got all kind of energy. Isn't that true? And oh my goodness, guess what just happened? Now, you know what's interesting is, what that means is not every day, but most days, I've got to call her in the middle of the day. Because something just happened and I got to tell somebody. You follow me? And I call, I said, Margaret, 60 seconds, just guess what did? You know, well, you're kidding me. Oh, okay. We laugh, hang up. Not tell others. You have no idea what that's done to cultivate our relationship. She knows that she's not the last person in the food chain to hear. She does the same for me, by the way. Number 3, friendship. Obviously, to cultivate a relationship, there needs to be a friendship. Samuel Johnson remarked, if a man does not make new acquaintances as he advances through life, he will soon find himself left alone. A man, sir, should keep his friendship in constant repair. That goes for old friendships as well as new ones. I think we sometimes take for granted the people closest to us, and as a result, we neglect to try being good friends to them first. Number 4 is memories. To cultivate relationships, you want to create memories. I really work hard on this because here's what I believe. Here's what I believe about your children. I believe that your children won't remember what you bought them at Christmas time 20 years from now. Maybe they remember a key bike when they were 10 years old. They remember 3, but can I tell you something? You'll buy them hundreds of things and they'll remember 3 or 4. Because people forget things. But people don't forget memories. The experiences you do together are more important than anything else. And so I determined a long time ago to become a maker of memories. And I literally, every month, work on 2 or 3 things that I believe will create memories for maybe somebody I work with, perhaps somebody, maybe for Margaret, maybe for my kids. But I'm always working on memories. Because here's what I know. If we do something together, we experience something together, they'll never forget those experiences. My kids, when we lived in San Diego, we were away from most of our family, which was back east. So Margaret and I determined when our children were very small that we would go up to a little place about 45 minutes from our house called Lawrencewell Village. And it had a little golf course and swimming pools and a place where you could fish and just all this stuff. And we decided that we would go and we'd get a little place there, a little timeshare there, and every year we'd go back to that same place. I was, the other day I was back, and we were going up to Los Angeles to play golf, and I was with my son-in-law, Steve Miller. And when we passed the village, Steve, I didn't say anything about it. Steve said, let me tell you something. He said, every time we pass this village, your daughter, Elizabeth, my wife, goes back into length of telling me all the things that she's done there. Well, she's not forgotten it. To cultivate a relationship, create memories. Number 5, growth. To cultivate a relationship, there has to be growth. Benjamin Franklin said, promise may get friends, but it is performance that keeps them. When you begin any relationship, it is filled with promise, but you have to find ways to keep it fresh and strong so that it continues to have potential and not just good memories. One way to do that is to grow together. Make your growth intentional with your best friends. Number 6, spoiling each other. Just practice spoiling each other. Voltaire wrote, if the first law of friendship is that it has to be cultivated, the second law is to be indulgent when the first law has been neglected. Just spoil your friends. Do just wonderful things for them. People principle number 18. People principle number 18 is the 101% principle. The 101% principle says, find the 1% that we agree on and give it 100% of our effort. Daryl Zanuck says, If two men on the same job agree all the time, then one is useless. If they disagree all the time, then both are useless. And the question I must ask myself is, can I find common ground, and will I give it 100% of my effort? Now, when do I practice this 101% principle? It is an incredible tool in anyone's relational toolbox. However, it's not something that can be pulled out and used all the time. I say that because this principle takes a big commitment of time, energy, and thinking. Therefore, before practicing this principle, you need to ask yourself some questions. Now, I know that I'm a little vulnerable when I start helping you ask these questions, but this principle takes such time and effort, you have to ask these questions. Number one, is the person worth the commitment? Every person has great worth, but they don't all have the same relational worth to you. So you have to ask yourself, where do I use this 101% principle? Where do I find that 1% we agree on and give it 100% of my effort? Because there's a lot of things we're disagreeing on. Well, family, inner circle people. But you can't give 100% commitment to 1% you agree on with everybody. So you have to kind of evaluate, who do I do this with? Number two, is the situation worth the commitment? A lot of situations you don't have to do this 101% principle at all, because it's just going to pass. It's just here, and it's going to pass whether you give it a commitment or not. Number three, is the issue worth the commitment? What is the issue? Is the issue worth you giving 100% of your commitment? And number four, is the return worth the commitment? So let's talk about this 101% return. Practicing the 101% principle can benefit you in many ways. Here are six. One, it allows you to build a foundation for change. Why? It's very simple. Change always begins on common ground. Just recently, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was spending a day with the CIA. They're going through a lot of changes, and so they said, John, we'd like to have you meet with 14 top leaders and have a long lunch, but then we would like you to address about 500 or 600 of our people that are kind of leading departments about all the changes we're going through, and how leaders view change and how they handle change. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful time. But what I shared with them that day, I share with you. When change must occur, there's a temptation for us to look at differences. Well, if I change, this is going to be different, and this will be different. And what happens is differences tend to separate us. And what we do is, when we want to see change accomplished, the first thing we want to do is we want to find common ground. What do we all agree on? Let's start there. Let's start on something that we can, let's find the 1% we agree on, and let's give it 100% of our effort. That's the beginning of a successful change. A lot of times change never occurs because we find the 1% we disagree on, and we give it 100% of our effort. Number two, it prevents unnecessary conflict. This 101% principle really eliminates a lot of conflict. General Grant said, there never was a time, in my opinion, some way could not be found to prevent the drawing of a sword. Number three, it reduces the odds of making enemies. Emerson observed, he who has 1,000 friends has not a friend to spare, while he who has one enemy will meet him everywhere. Number four, it keeps something of value that could have been lost. When you practice this 101% principle, you really get to keep those things that you value and those people you value. In the paragraph in your notes, how many potentially rewarding relationships have you missed because you focused on the differences instead of the common ground? How many potential friends have slipped through your fingers? How many productive business associations have been forfeited? Former New York Yankees manager Joe McCartney observed, any manager who can't get along with a 400 hitter is crazy. Number 5, it helps you to feel good about your part of the relationship. The reason it helps you and I feel good about our part of the relationship is because we know we're doing our very best. I'm right now personally going through an issue in a relationship that is extremely difficult. Pretty much, I've got bad news for somebody that I care a lot about. And the only thing that gives me strength in this whole process, the only thing that gives me peace in this process is I know without question that I've given this effort 100%. I mean, I have not slighted it in any way. I've done my very best to make it work. Now, what I'm saying is, when you have done your very best to make it work, it doesn't always work. Isn't that true? We've all come up to the place where 100% wasn't enough. But when I walk away from a situation that doesn't work out good, and I know with integrity that I've given it my best shot, and that my motives have been right, and my effort has been total, I can walk away. Disappointed? Yes. But not devalued, because I gave that individual the very best that I could. Number 6, one more thing about the 100% principle. It enables you to make the best of difficult situations. The happiest people don't necessarily have the best of everything, they just make the best of everything. Adopting the 101% principle makes the best of every relational opportunity, and no one can be expected to do more than that. People principle number 19, the patience principle. The patience principle says the journey with others is slower than the journey alone. For the friendship of two, the patience of one is necessary. And the question that I must ask myself is, do I take others with me even when it's inconvenient? By the way, when I wrote this relationship book, I can tell you, sometimes when people look at an author, they think that the author writes those things which he or she really is good at. When I write, I have to have about 4 or 5 timeouts. Kind of like, excuse me, I'm writing this because I know it's true, not because I'm good at this. In fact, when I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, 6 of the 21 laws I don't do well at all. In fact, I would rate myself average or lower than average. 6 of them. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I know I have to have a team around me. Are you with me? Because I'm not good at them. In fact, if you think you're good at all of them, you need a therapist around you. You need a real friend that cares for you, because you're in deep weeds. Well, it's also true about these relationship rules, and this one here, this patience principle, this whole issue of taking people on the journey, you have to understand, I flunk this, okay? I'm not a patient person. When I was in school, what I hated more than anything else about school was review day, where the teacher would say, now tomorrow we're going to review our notes for the last 6 weeks because we're getting ready for a big test, and we'll review the notes so we can get ready for the test. And I'd raise my hand and say, do I have to come? And she'd say, of course you have to come. Why wouldn't you come? Because I took notes the first time. Excuse me? If I got it, do I have to come? And they always made me come. And I hated it. I'd say, here I am, sitting in the classroom, did my stuff on the front end. Now I'm waiting for everybody on the back end. Hit the ball and drag Charlie. Hit the ball and drag Charlie. Hit the ball and drag Charlie. After a while, don't you just want to hit Charlie? This has been a hard one for me to learn. One of my leadership lessons as I learned about what leadership is I learned that leaders aren't the first to cross the finish line. They may be the fastest, but they reduce their speed so everybody else can cross the finish line with them. What leaders do and what leaders know is that the very fact that you're a leader is that you bring people with you. That's where the patience principle comes in. In your notes, I constantly cast vision for the people of my organization, and then I left them behind. Not a good thing for a leader. I had to learn to connect with people and develop patience. These are two critical steps in relationship building. Patience without connection, and the relationship lacks energy. Connection without patience, and the relationship lacks potential. Connection with patience, the relationship has energy and potential. And if you want relationships to last, you need both energy and potential. So how do you become more patient in relationships? Number one, prioritize patience as a virtue worthy of developing. In fact, Aristotle said, the greatest virtues are those which are most useful to other persons. Nothing is more useful to other persons than patience. Number two, understand that it takes time to build good relationships. Number three, practice the exchange principle. We've already talked about that. Instead of putting others in their place, what do we say? Put yourself in their place. To develop patience, you need to appreciate other people, how they think, and be sensitive to how they feel. Every person thinks his problems are the biggest, his jokes are the funniest, his prayers should get special attention, his situation is different, his victories are the most exemplary, and his faults should be overlooked. That's just how we are. Number four, realize that people have and create problems. When it comes to people, there are good news and there's bad news. The good news is that some people in your life are going to be the source of your greatest joy, and the bad news is that those same people may be the cause of your greatest problem. That's true not only at home, but also at work. And the higher you climb in leadership, the more difficult the problems. The findings of leadership experts Warren Bennis and Bert Nannis bear this out. They state, what we have found is that the higher the rank, the more interpersonal and human the undertaking. Our top executives spend roughly 90% of their time with others, and virtually the same amount of time concerned with the messiness of people problems. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Number five, identify areas where people need patience with you. Oh my goodness. Now this has helped me a lot. I'll pass this on to you because it's amusing to me, but it's really helped me a lot. Because I have a problem with patience with others, one of the things I have done is I have gone to people who love me the most, my inner circle, and I've asked them to give me ways that they have to be patient with me. Now we go to the synergy, the highest level of relationships, where we have to ask the question, can we create a win-win relationship? 4 people principles. Number 22, the boomerang principle. When we help others, we help ourselves. Or as Andrew Carnegie said, no man becomes rich unless he enriches others. The question I must ask myself is, do I experience a return when I help others? Too many times people approach life like a slot machine. They want to put as little in as possible and hopefully get a lot in return. There are three types of people I've noticed. There are, number one, takers. Now, takers receive and never give. Many people focus on themselves and rarely go out of their way to do anything for others, and such people are takers. They worry only about what they can get, and they're never satisfied. Then there are traders. Receive and then give. Some people focus on keeping score. They are willing to give, but their primary motivation isn't to help others. They see relationships as an exchange. Often they give because they think they owe something to someone who has helped them, and they desire to make things even. Number three, investors. They give and then receive. In the third group, people focus on others. They give first and then they receive something if something is offered in return. They believe that success comes from being helpful, caring, and constructive. They desire to make everything and everyone they touch better, and they understand that the best way to accomplish that is to give of themselves. Ironically, by possessing an agenda to give first, they are the ones who most often experience the synergy of a win-win relationship. So what do investors do? One, they thank others first. And two, they don't expect short-term gain. And number three, they invest in people with potential. Let me just stop here for a moment. In 1995, I spent 6 months making a list of 10 people that I would invest in. It took me quite some time to settle in on those that I should really do this with. To be honest with you, I took a spiritual route and I did some prayer. But I also just tried to observe and tried to find people that I especially thought had greater potential than me, that if I would serve them and if I would just invest in them, the return would be pretty huge. And I determined that I would never tell them that they were on my list. I would just invest in them. I can tell you, I started that in 1995. The list has somewhat changed. Of the 10 that I started off with, there are 4 still on the list. But through the process of time, some I helped for a period of time, and then I felt that I had invested in them as much as I could to help them in the areas that I could help them in, and many of them have gone on to do just tremendous things. And so I would add, as I would drop one off, I would add another one. 10 people. They to this day don't know. They never will. The satisfaction is in me knowing that I'm giving, expecting nothing in return. And then as I watch them do well, the reward is amazing. Now, they're not doing well just because of my investment. In fact, to be honest with you, most of them are very confident they would do well without my investment. But they're doing better because of my investment. And I know that. That's what I'm talking about in this whole issue of investing in people. If you do those 3 things, think of others first, don't expect short-term gains, invest in people with potential. Number 4 is bound to happen. You will enjoy a return in due season. That's a fact. Poet Edwin Markham wrote, "There is a destiny that marks us as brothers. No one goes his way alone, and all that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own." People principle number 23 is the friendship principle. And the friendship principle says, all things being equal, people will work with people they like. All things not being equal, they still will. Thoreau said, "The most I can do for a friend is simply be his friend." And the question that I must ask myself, am I a friend to the people I work with? There are 4 levels of business relationships. As soon as you understand the way that relationships affect business, you begin to realize that all business relationships are not created equal. As I have studied the subject, I have focused and I have discovered that there are 4 levels. Number 1 is people knowledge. Your understanding of people helps you build your business. In the introduction of this book, I discussed the importance of people skills and business relationships. They are absolutely essential to success. All the product knowledge in the world won't help someone without people skills, nor will technical expertise, nor will the ability to build a brilliantly efficient organization. If individuals don't possess people skills, they very quickly hit a ceiling in their effectiveness. People knowledge. But number 2 is service skills. Your treatment of people helps build your business. Barry Gibbons, the author of This Indecision is Final, maintains between 70 and 90% of decisions not to repeat a purchase of anything are not about product or price. They are about some dimension of service, of the service relationship. Number 3 is business reputation. Your reputation for relationships helps you build the business. Howard Hodgkin said, whatever business you're in, you are in the business of relationships. That's why your reputation is your greatest asset. And then number 4, personal friendship. Your friendship with others builds your business. The highest level of business relationships is reached when people like your business, but more important, they like you. When there's a heartfelt personal connection to another person, it becomes stronger than any other kind of business bond. That's why I say, all things being equal, people will work with people they like, and all things not being equal, they still will. Friendship is the difference maker. During the war in Vietnam, General William Westmoreland was reviewing a platoon of paratroopers, and he would go down the line and ask them the same question, how do you like jumping? And, they would say, love it, sir. And he just got the same greatest experience of my life, sir. And he just kept getting these wonderful positive things about parachuting. And he came down the line and finally came to a soldier and asked him the question, how do you like jumping? And he said, I hate it, sir. And then the general said, well, then why do you do it? And he said, because I want to be around the guys who do it, sir. It's the whole relationship factor. All things being equal. People will do business with people they like. All things not being equal, they still will. Number 24. People principle number 24. The partnership principle. Working together increases the odds of winning together. Or as tiny Mother Teresa said, you can do what I cannot do, and I can do what you cannot do. Together we can do great things. And the question you must ask yourself, are others better off because of their partnership with me? And my journey to understanding the partnership principle begins like this. Number 1, I want to make a difference. Like many people, I started out in what I call the self stage. My focus was on me and what I could do. That's not to say I was doing anything wrong. My motives were positive. It's just that my perspective, along with my effectiveness, was so limited. Then I went to stage 2. I want to make a difference with people. When I began to look at myself, I discovered that I could go farther and achieve more when others joined me on their journey. And as a result, I wanted to take everybody with me. It didn't take long for me to realize that was a mistake, and here's why. Not everyone should take the trip. Passion. Have you ever worked with people who said that they were on board with you and believed in what you were doing to accomplish, yet you kept having to talk them into doing their part? Those people have no passion for their work. They may want to take the ride, but they have no interest in pedaling. Take them on and you will wear yourself out. Not everyone wants to take the trip. That deals with attitude. Some people just don't believe in you or what you're doing. That doesn't mean you're wrong, or it doesn't make them wrong. It just means you shouldn't try to take them with you. Not everyone can take the trip. Ability. The difference between a partnership, oh, this is a great statement. The difference between a partnership and a rescue mission is capacity. Some people may want to make a difference, but they have no ability to affect what you're doing. You cannot afford to partner with someone with who there is no fit. The main lesson I learned during this phase is that I should try to build relationships with everyone, but I should forge partnerships with only a few. So I've gone from I want to make a difference to I want to make a difference with people to number 3, I want to make a difference with people who want to make a difference. English statesman Henry Van Dyke observed, in the process of personality, first comes a declaration of independence, then a recognition of interdependence. Number 4, I want to make a difference with people who want to make a difference doing something that makes a difference. Only at this stage in my life have I entered what I call the significant stage. I have many rewarding relationships, partnerships, and together we are doing many things that are making a positive impact by helping others. I can't imagine anything more rewarding. Rabbi Harold Kushner remarked, "The purpose of life is not to win. The purpose of life is to grow and to share." When you come to look back on all that you have done in life, you will get more satisfaction from the pleasure you have brought into other people's lives than you will from the times that you outdid and defeated them. I believe that to be true. Not too long ago, about 10 years ago, I crossed an important line in my life, where one day I awakened to the fact that the success of others and what I can contribute to their success is more meaningful to me than my own personal success. That's the day that I changed my definition of success. And I began to understand that success for me is not personal success, but success for me is adding value to others and watching them be more successful. Now, what I understand about this journey, what I understand about partnership is very simple. Life is very short, and it's difficult to accomplish significant things without others.